All right, so welcome to yet another Metalogix quick take session. This is where we kind of highlight a specific aspect or troubleshooting topic or feature functionality within one or more of our tools and kind of go through it quickly and succinctly within a 30-minute time frame, and then invite questions and comments after the fact. Each of these sessions is recorded, and you can get to them from that link there, metalogix.com/support/academy. And they're also available as knowledge base entries within our portal's knowledge base. So if you have access to that, you can always get to them there as well. My name is Roy Martinez. I am have been the lead Metalogix support representative for SharePoint Backup. Lately, I've transitioned to the solution engineering role, so I'm got quite a few years of experience working with this backup tool since its original inception, and I've had the wonderful opportunity to watch its feature set grow over time since it was released as a 1.0 way back when at the in Idera. So I've kind of seen it all when it comes to this particular tool, and I'm eager to share all of my accumulated knowledge and expertise with you guys. Today's topic is restoring granular data from native SQL backup sets, as opposed to Metalogix proprietary backup sets. So what we're going to cover is we're going to talk briefly, very briefly, about how, and this was also slightly covered in our last quick take session, but we're going to talk about how and why you would want to leverage native SQL backups as opposed to our own. In other words, how we can fit backup into an existing SQL Server disaster recovery strategy and leverage, obviously, BAK file or raw data and log files in the form of MDF and LDF files. We're going to talk about a few options we've got for this native SQL granular restore concept, including mounting full or differential backups either from back files or from data files, and then the wonderful concept of mounting from a transaction log backup, giving us a much higher grade of point-in-time recovery. So that said, why don't we just jump directly out of this PowerPoint and take a look at some actual server action. So here I've got an environment. Let's see here. Let me just adjust my screen share real quick. There we go. So here I've got a server environment with a farm. And let me just introduce the farm real quick. It's very simple, very light. It just consists of two servers, essentially. I've got a server that handles the WFE application, etc. role, and I've got a server that handles the SQL role, and that server has all my content databases, etc. on it. So SharePoint 2013 that you're seeing here, that's slowly trudging along to bring up central administration, is my, basically for all intents and purposes, my WFE and my app and my search and my index and everything else. And then over here, this machine called SQL is the database host for all of my SharePoint databases, content databases, managed metadata, search, etc. Incidentally, I'll also be using this SQL Server to mount my data too. As you can see, I've got a few Metalogix temp databases here in various states. And yeah, so that's basically the high ground of what this farm looks like. So let's get right into it. Well, assuming that my VPN servers are going to respond to me. There we go. All right, so here's SharePoint Backup, and I've taken several backups here within the tool, but again, we're not going to be talking so much about those. We're going to be talking about our native SQL stuff. So we're going to pretend for a moment that I have a company wherein I've already got SQL servers set up with maintenance policies. I've already got all my content databases protected in that sense from the SQL perspective. Perhaps I have several policies that manage backing up all my content DBs. I have a policy to back up all my search, etc., etc. In other words, I've already got this stuff protected, but I do love the idea of being able to restore granular content, i.e. sites, subsites, libraries, lists, documents, etc. So I want to take advantage of that aspect of what SharePoint Backup offers, but I don't necessarily need to reinvent the wheel by creating new backup sets and, kind of eating up storage where I don't necessarily have to, right? And that's kind of the idea behind this particular functionality support, is that we don't want to, we wanted to provide options for those who've already got these questions answered by different means. So the only limitation, or for lack of a better term, limitation, is that when I refer to a native SQL backup, I mean a backup in a .bak format. Therefore, if we're talking about any other technology that takes backups and puts them in their own proprietary file format, backup will not play nice with those. He will only play nice with native SQL .bak files. So let's just assume that I've got all my databases protected, and I want to restore granular content, and I want to use the mount functionality, but I want to leverage those existing databases. I've got a couple of ways I can do this. So as you can see, I've got a couple of things already mounted here, but we're going to go through the wizard and kind of pick and choose the things we want to mount. So our first option here in the source step is to tell the tool what kind of backup set are we going to be mounting. Now, we've talked about Metalogix full farm backup in previous quick take sessions. We've mentioned the idea that we can mount from a native SharePoint backup, and that we can even link to a live content database. We've touched on the idea of grabbing data files directly, but this is the big new option in 5.1 that we really want to explore, right? SQL Server backup files, including full differential and translog. So let's go ahead and click Next here. Just like before, we're going to define which SQL Server instance we plan to mount this to. Again, in my case, I've kind of got a lot of leeway here, so I'm going to mount it directly back to my SharePoint SQL Server instance. But again, this could be any SQL Server instance you want in your enterprise. You could have a dedicated SQL instance, perhaps, maybe a standby SQL instance whose whole role is to host these mounted databases for restorations temporarily. In my case, I can kind of do whatever I want without too much worry, so I'm going to go ahead and mount these guys to my SharePoint SQL instance. And I'm going to leverage my backup service user account, although I could, if I wanted to, leverage a specific SQL login for that particular instance. I'll go Next. And here I have a couple of options. First, let's talk about this browse directly to backup files. This is basically exactly as you would expect. If I go Next here, this should look a lot like, or similar to the wizards within SQL itself. I'm going to go to the location of my backup set. For instance, let's just say it lives, let's say it lives there. And I've got a couple backs here. They've been offloaded already after the maintenance policy did its thing. Maybe they're on tape. Maybe they're in a separate NAS or some other like archive location. I need to be able to get to those. This is kind of the use case for the navigate directly to back file. Just wherever they live in the file system on your network, we can just go get to them, right? No questions asked. It's just a UNC path. I select the particular back file. I go next through the wizard, and then I give it some options. We're going to talk a little bit more about this momentarily. Let me just go back here and choose the other option. So this is the more powerful option in my opinion, and this is what I think is the most exciting part of the new native SQL functionality. And this is going to let us search for backups by name, data, type, etc., right from within SQL. In other words, we're going to be leveraging SQL's own internal system databases, system tables, to find out what's been backed up and where it is, right? So every time you set up that maintenance policy, obviously SQL is keeping track of what he's been backing up. We're going to leverage those records to learn that. So we could, specify a name for filtering. I'm going to go ahead and filter by date time. I'm going to give myself a couple of months of data, and I want to see all, actually let's look at fulls first. Go ahead and search, and now I can see all the full backups that have been taken on that SQL instance. Notice here in the SQL Server dropdown, I can specify all or the specific instance. In a situation wherein you might have a tiered or multiple SQL node architecture, this all would just search through all of those different SQL servers, or you could specify the specific instance if need be. So when I search, it literally just pings SQL, asks what's out there, and here's the answer it gets. But what's really cool is when we start to check these buttons, and we do a search. Now, not only do I get the full, but I get the associated diffs and transaction log backups. And what's cool about this is that if I select the most recent trans log as what I want to restore from in terms of the point in time, when I click next, it's going to automatically associate and track back all the necessary transaction logs, differentials, and fulls, going back to the full to get us the correct and proper data set, as opposed to, I don't know if you were familiar with going through native means, as opposed to going in and selecting each individual trans log, making sure the chain is unbroken, et cetera, et cetera. In the next options view, we're just going to give it a name, and I think this name is just fine for me. Name of the backup set followed by a date timestamp. And this is interesting. We can identify where we want our data files to live. So whenever I perform a mount, essentially what I'm doing is I'm attaching a database, right? And when you attach a database in SQL Server, you know, you're either tracking back to a .bak or you're tracking back to MDF and LDF files, and those MDF and LDF files have to live somewhere. Usually when you attach, you're attaching from a UNC path or you've stored stuff locally. But we can actually change where those data files get located. So we can, for instance, it's limited to what I've got set up in my preferences for backup locations. But as you can see here, I've got a couple backup locations set up. If I wanted to stage the data for this mount to a different file path location, I could do so. Otherwise, I'll just use the default SQL data logs path, right? Which is, I guess, you know, program files, Microsoft SQL Server, instance, data, etc. So yeah, this is a slightly powerful feature. Again, depending on how your storage is set up and whether you need that level of additional granular control. Secondarily here, if the backup set were encrypted, we can supply those encryption passwords here. And if we go next, we should be prompted to choose which farm. Now this is only relevant if I'm managing multiple farms in my console. I'm not, but if I had 2 2013 farms or 2 2010 farms or 3 even, I could define which specific farm I plan to be granularly restoring to. Now of course they have to be within the same SharePoint version, but yeah, there is some level of support for going from one farm to another in that respect for granular detail. Then I have a quick summary. So here's the back file. Here's the instance I'm writing to and the farm. So let's cross our fingers and hope that my VM is up to par and that there's nothing going to stop me from getting this mounted for you guys. I think it should be fine. But it is a testing VM, so you never really know, right? Great. Looking tough. Let's just let that finalize. So because the backup media set includes full, diff, and trans, we kind of saw a 100% go up, and then it kind of tracked back to start tracking again. And that's because, you know, it identified the full, the diff, and the trans. That action was 100%, and then now the actual mount of that transaction log to the associated full is what's being tracked now. May actually happen again since there was a differential in between as well. There we go. We're all set and complete. So now, 2 things. If I go to SQL and refresh my databases view, I should see a newly created temporary database for the content database that was included in that backup set. Right? And then furthermore, if I go into the Restore tab of my backup tool, go to the backup set that I just mounted, I should now be able to enumerate all that data from within and drill down to my specific subsite, drill down to a particular library, select a specific document, select a specific library. From this point forth, it's as any other granular restore concept, right? So now I can simply either restore directly in place, going right back where it came from, I can select the out of place option to relocate that library to a different web app, to a different subsite, to a different site collection, etc., etc. And we're going to talk about, in our next actual quick take session, I'm going to kind of explore all the different restore options up in the wizard, talk about what the future holds, talk about self-service recovery, things of that nature, just the restore story from start to finish. But hopefully this is useful in terms of identifying how these new native concepts are beneficial. So to summarize what we talked about so far, we can now select to mount from native SQL Server Backup files. We have the option of either browsing directly to data files via UNC path, or alternatively searching from SQL Server's internal system tables to identify particular backup sets as tracked by SQL Server, including but not limited to all the way down to the differential and transaction log subsets. We're able to click on a single transaction log point in time and have the tool associate the necessary files for us. We give it a name. We specify which path we want the data to be hosted from in the mounted database on our instance. We have options for encryption. And once things are mounted, everything should operate as any other mounted database. So I hope that was informative. So at this point, we've got about 10 minutes or so to spare. So if anyone has any questions or feedback or comments, feel free to pop them in now, and I'm happy to go through. In the interim, why don't I go ahead and restore some content? How about that? So let me go to my workspace site collection. Let's go to my subsite A. Let's go to that documents library. Let's delete these guys, at least one of them. That's deleted. So now I should be theoretically able to drill down into my site collection, to my subsite A, go into Documents, select my deleted file, click Restore. There's the content I'm restoring. Yep, I'll keep all versions. Yep, I'll keep the permissions for the item. Click Restore. Let's see what we get. No questions thus far. I guess that means I've done a great job in explaining. I spoke too soon. Oh, Beiruz asks, which version am I looking at? The version in question here is going to be 5.1.4051. This is the most recently available version on the Metalogix downloads website. Looks like my restore completed. Let me just check on that real quick and refresh. What do you know? There's my content. Same metadata, same modified by, outstanding. The next quick take session that'll kind of go through all the restore stuff, not yet scheduled, but it'll probably be around this week next month. We try to do these monthly on the backup side, so I would expect that the first or second week of second or third week of November, we'll have the next backup quick take session. Don't quote me on that, but we usually try to do them on Wednesdays or Thursdays. Aha. So Climb asks, what would be the procedure to restore the entire content database, not just some specific content from within it? Yeah, so that's kind of going to a different scope, but yeah, from the farm backup / restore aspect, we can restore databases directly. The difference is, though, unfortunately at this point, Farm Backup and Restore will not support restoring native database backups separately to SQL. We have to work with our own proprietary file format to that point. But as you can see in my backup, for instance, in this one, I literally just select a database and click Restore. And for all intents and purposes, this is basically a complete SQL Server database restore, right? So as such, you should expect the same kind of impact as if you were restoring the database directly within SQL. Otherwise, it's almost a negligible interface. It's just simply tell me what you want to restore and click Go, and it restores it. On the out of place side, it's slightly different. It's a little bit tricky here. So out of place from this scope really means unpack this proprietary backup set and give me those data files, right? And then once you have the data files, then you just restore it to a network file location of your choice. Once you have the data files, then you can go attach them to whatever SQL instance you want. So, and we can talk about that in another session for sure. So yeah, full content DB, we do not support restoring native just yet. Could be on the horizon, we'll see. Okay, so Beirut says, please do a session on total disaster recovery. I'd like to see how we can recover the total farm. That is definitely on the horizon, Beirut. It's just been a matter, honestly, of getting a back-end VM infrastructure set up that I can actually properly illustrate such a concept, right? So here in support, I only have certain VMs, so I need to leverage Q to help me build out a new environment so I can go from zero to nothing, so to speak. But yeah, so that's definitely on the horizon, and it's definitely one of the more, for lack of a better term, challenging concepts in terms of wrapping your head around just what this tool will offer, because as we all know, the tool does not yet offer a quote-unquote bare metal restoration option. In other words, click a button and you've got a new farm kind of thing. But yeah, there are definitely some very detailed steps on how to go about taking what we've protected with this tool and utilizing it to build out a new farm in the event of disaster. And that's definitely something that will happen. Again, I just need to have the correct back-end setup for it to be a better illustrated session. So the scenario we have is copy content DB from prod to our test environment, use out-of-place restore for this. Right, so Climb, if you're talking about moving a content database from prod to test, two separate farms, then yeah, you would use the out-of-place farm backup restore to basically unpack our backup set. It's going to give you the data and log file for that content DB, and then you'll just have to use native means to attach that database to the test SQL instance. And again, there's a whole wealth of documentation on the subject in the Metalogix docs. I can send those over to you. But yeah, this is kind of going back to what Barry was saying. We should probably have a quick take session on that concept in and of itself. And William seconds that, or I should say thirds that. Cool. All right. So we're coming up on the 5-minute mark. Anything else while we're here? I mean, I'm happy to have just an open discussion. And that's another thing that we do from time to time. Keep in mind is we sometimes have these kind of open round tables here at Metalogix where I or another one of the product experts will just basically start up a session that is audio enabled, so everyone's talking. So keep on the lookout for those as well. I think those are great sessions, and we kind of cover a lot of ground, so to speak, in those for high-level discussion. Otherwise, yeah, we try to keep them focused in these quick take sessions. All right. Well, if there's nothing else, I will give us 5 minutes of our days back. So, guys, I want to thank everybody for joining. It obviously, the more the merrier. I really love doing these sessions, and I love the feedback. So, if there's anything you want to see, I think this is great. What we talked about today, this is a fantastic idea for a future quick take. If there's anything else you want to see, please feel free to submit it to the support portal or email Metalogix directly, and let us know. Otherwise, I once again appreciate all your time and thank you for your attendance. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.